Good morning and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. Is corruption winning the quote-unquote fight against corruption? It does appear that is where we are now. Between 2016 and 2020, the Auditor General's report replete with acts of theft, thievery, in excess of 3 billion has not been recovered. The Auditor General does practically nothing about it, unlike the previous Auditor General, Daniel Domolevo, who recovered in excess of 70 million back to chest. He does nothing. It takes civil society to continue to hound him, especially Occupy Ghana, to do the right thing. He's not bothered. And those that have the power to check him are also not bothered. So are you surprised that now moving from perception to actual bribe giving, public officers in 2021 alone have asked, received in excess of 5 billion? Where are we heading with this? How can it be stopped? And the majority leader was attacked in his constituency. The people are fed up with promises that are not kept. So they threw sachet water at him about roads that are not fixed, and yet they sit in Accra and tell the whole world that we have had a year of roads, unprecedented roads have been done. Now, the majority group in Parliament, the Ashanti MPP MPs, have joined their constituents for once to tell their own government that something must be done. What will be done? And will all other MP groups in the regions do a similar thing? Where are we heading again? We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini. And this morning, as often, many of you reach out to me and try to suggest what should constitute my take. A very good friend of mine kept pushing one particular subject this week. And I felt, what's my business if adults are heard on radio and TV trading insults? Why should it be my business? It only tells who they are. So eventually, I decided that instead of just minding my business, at least I can say this. So I say, stop it. Just stop it. The late President, Professor John Evans Atta Mills, died in office 10 years ago, tomorrow, 24th of July, 2022. The ugly media spectacle between some members of his family, some members of the NDC and Koko Ayedoho, who is angry at and livid every minute, speaking on radio and spewing pure insult and nothing else. They have been trading insults over the renovation and commissioning of the Asumdwe Park and the whereabouts of his mortal remains. That's a bit strange, though. It's both disgusting and disrespectful to the memory of the late president. On the eve of the 10th anniversary of his death, yes, he came from a family. Yes, he belonged to a political party. But he was the president of Ghana. Today we are talking about corruption. And he's the only president that people can point to and say he was not corrupt, even including his opponents. He belonged to the whole country prior to his unfortunate demise. And yes, he taught many people the law. His legacy and memory transcend his family and political ties. Well, it's obviously very wrong if his family was not consulted. Rather, a certain institute set up at his back that was consulted and leading the process. For those who knew Professor Mills, it is a strange irony that the 10th anniversary of the death of the kind-hearted, humble, and peace-loving former president should be characterized by such acrimonious and uncultured public insult fest. Well, this was a man who, we're told by his opponents, had turned the castle into a church. He didn't waste your money building a cathedral, let alone to spend on a cathedral without accounting for it and without parliamentary approvals. Did you lot not learn anything from the good professor while he was alive? What are you seeking to achieve? If we had very good presidential historians and biographers documenting Professor Mills's life as president of Ghana and the months leading up to his death, would any of you come out smelling of roses? Do you want the media to share the stories of what some witnessed during the 2008 and 2012, presidential election campaigns, and how the media had to censor some footages at the plea of Professor Mills's handlers and at the editorial meetings of media houses giving the ethics of the profession? The man was really very sick. You took him out of the country to seek medical help. You brought him to the tarmac and got him to jump. We could hear from his voice that he was literally dying. And you kept lying to Ghanaians about the state of his health. Do you want the media to talk about how he was literally forced against his will to address the crowd at a campaign event because the crowd had waited all afternoon and his physical condition at the time was really terrible? Professor Mills meant well for Ghana, and he was partly, somewhat, some will say, to blame for not sticking to his guns on his decisions we are told about to retire from politics and later his decision to resign as president. He needed to focus on his health and his life. Somehow, his life did not agree with the rot of politics that you guys engage in. You stole in his face, and he was tired of the theft and the lies. Life and death are in the hands of God. The late president was a devout Christian. So we can only accept that whatever happened, God must have allowed everything. But don't insult the memory of Professor Mills with this childish public and personal self-promotion. He was, and his memory is a national treasure that must be preserved. So stop it. Just stop this nonsense. And that's my take. This show is brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Waylead Properties, home is where one starts. Fanat Ghana, think wood, think Fanat. And Duroplus, where Duroplus goes, water flows. I'll be right back to introduce you my guest, and then we begin the discussion on corruption. And earlier, I said that the Auditor General's report from 2016 to 2020 contains stolen money and lost money in excess of $3 billion. I meant $3 billion. I meant to say $6 billion. And we are here going to the IMF for only $2 billion. We can't retrieve the money that we have, that is ours, that you, the people in public office and politicians, have stolen. We're going to the IMF for more. But that money, like the Occupy Ghana says, will it not end up in private pockets? We'll be right back.
10.3% of our population, of our citizens, the adult population, were offered money ahead of the elections, and they did indicate that 4.2% of them indicated that another family member was offered money for the same. How is this affecting our economy? We quantified it, and it's 5 billion Ghana cedis in the year 2021. What are the next steps? Your Lordship, we hope to collaborate with UNODC, TRAJ, and all the anti-corruption agencies that are in this room and are joining virtually or were not able to join, to have stakeholder engagement, do detailed engagement with the numbers that I've shared, looking at the relationships to nail down the issue of corruption at both the national and the subnational level.
I belong to the school of thought that it is our biggest problem as a nation. Even before this, the Auditor General's report says that between 2016 and 2020, we lost 48 billion to corruption. That is 48 billion. If we were to convert 48 billion to the old currency, we'll be getting into a trillions of Ghana cedis. So I believe it's leadership. They say a fish rots from its head. So where the head itself is rotten, and so I'm quickly coming to the point that yesterday, look, I heard lay people on radio make a certain point, and I buy into it. They said the capital of corruption is the Jubilee House. So this report should be thrown into the dustbin. The capital of corruption is the Jubilee House. That's where real corruption, the big, the millions of dollars, that's where it happens. That is where all the big people are, and that is where they do the biggest deals. So when you are talking about petty corruption, not to undermine it, but it's just that the police, the 10 cedis here, 20 cedis here, immigration and the rest, it's a joke. The millions of dollars is a Jubilee House.
Right. So you just heard a while ago the government statistician, Professor Anyenini, on the bribery issue, and they have done a comprehensive work, surveyed with such a wide, sample that they used, and they're talking about actual corruption. It's not about perception. It's not about perception, it's actual corruption. Right. And you also heard Martin Pebu, who is here in the studio now, together with Mary Awalana Ada, Programs Manager, Ghana Integrity Initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Joining us via Zoom, Professor Samuel Kobna Enin himself, who is a government statistician, together with Shraj and the United Nations Organization on Drugs and Crime, have done this really very good job. Also, Professor Kwesi Ening, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs, Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, and Dr. John Osai Kwapong, is Political Scientist, Democracy and Development Fellow, CDD Ghana. And they have another Barometer out, which has very bad ratings for our government. Is it how many out of 10 say the country is heading the wrong way? It's not heading the right way. Well, but the Barometer has also been doing research on corruption. And you remember the last time when they did the research on corruption, many people were aware of corruption, were aware of corruption and how pervasive it was, but they were afraid of retaliation, and so they will not report it. And that is where you heard Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante speak about normalization of corruption. That is where we were 2 years ago, normalization of corruption. Then today, I don't know where we are. Either we have a seared situation of corruption, so we can't feel anything again. If it's been normalized, then at this point, we are seared. We can't feel it. It goes on as usual. All right. So let me start with right here in the studio with Mary. Ghana Integrity Initiative, this is your forte. This is where you've been doing a lot of work together with your mother organization, the Transparency International. How do you take this result?
Thank you very much, Samson. Let me say good morning to your viewers and good morning to the very distinguished panel for today's show. For us, I was at the launch of the event and I made the submission that the results that have been churned out by the Statistical Service and the SHRAJ is not that surprising, because we have had occasion to do same over the years. Let me say that we, as part of a consortium that worked on the issue of perceptions and corruption, we called it the Knowledge, Perceptions and Experiences of Corruption Survey in 2017. This was a USAID-funded project which was over a 5-year period. And we did not only seek to document the knowledge of the citizenry when it comes to the issue of corruption. We wanted to understand what people of Ghana thought corruption was. And let me say that we sampled over 17,000 Ghanaians. The difference there between this and the Statistical Service sample is the fact that they did per household, and so it depends on the sample. For us, we did almost 18,000 Ghanaians as our sample for that survey. And in it, we wanted to know what Ghanaians thought corruption was. And so at the end of the day, our analysis showed clearly that bribery was the best indicator Ghanaians appreciated as corruption,
right,
because they saw a lot of other things. Again, we went to look at the perceptions of Ghanaians when it comes to the subject matter of corruption. And for the first time, in a comprehensive manner, we decided to also look at experiences of Ghanaians when it comes to corruption. And in this, I am mentioning the Transparency International methodology, which is the Global Corruption Barometer. It seeks to ask if you have had an interaction with a public officer. And in the interaction, they follow, if you have not had an interaction, then you do not proceed to these other questions in the survey. But if you have had an interaction, then the other question then follows. Did you pay a bribe? Or did you not have to pay a bribe? Or if you have had to pay something as a compensation of sorts? And it's revealing, we did it per the institutions. And therein, if you look at that report, you would realize that in most of the institutions that have been mentioned by the Statistical Service, ours, we decided to categorize the institutions a little bit differently than what they have done now. We have the executive, we have the legislature, the judiciary, but in this current report, you realize that they have looked at the issues differently, categorized the various institutions providing services in a very different manner. And I think that is also very exhaustive. They have their reasons for doing that, and it's also good. But we are saying that for a fact we've done this before. It's not surprising at all, the figures we have found. And then on the issue of the dynamics around gender and corruption, again, the Ghana Integrity Initiative, as far back as 2014, I was part of that research. Myself and my former boss, Mr. Vitus Azim, we documented the gender dynamics of corruption. And this current survey, again, confirms the views of Ghanaians when it comes to who is more likely to pay a bribe between men and women, and who is less likely to request for a bribe. I believe that this survey, it's not too different from what we have done before, but it goes a longer way to document and then quantify the sums of monies that are collected as bribes. And I think that is a good benchmark and a baseline for us as a country to document. I say so because the SDGs have targets and indicators and milestones based on which we need to measure as a country. And if we are to make progress, we need those benchmark indicators to be able to ascertain if we are making any progress. And I say this report is also useful because then when civil society does it, it is, the impression is that this is civil society. We have had some bashing along, people saying you sit in your office and just decide to document things to paint the government black. Fortunately for us, we have the institution that collects data, analyzes for us in all indicators for this country. That's the Ghana Statistical Service and SHRAJ, which is the main anti-corruption institution per our constitution, coming out with these findings. So for me, for nothing else, I believe that the credibility of our fight against corruption going forward would be then benchmarked on these and the actions that would follow if our government, and I mean our president, the current leadership, wants to take the fight against corruption seriously.
Right. So I'm going to get to Professor Anyenini himself, to help us with some understanding of the job that they have done. But before that, I'm taking my guests their preliminary views, whether they are surprised at this or they are not, and if they are surprised, why so? So let me get to Dr. Osei Kwapong. Thank you very much for making the time to join us. So what do you say about the survey? At least looking at 15,000 respondents that they had to engage.
Samson, and good morning to everyone. I'm not really surprised by what the survey is documenting. If you follow some of the work that the Ghana Integrity Initiative has done in trying to understand, our perceptions of corruption, but also actual experiences with bribery. And then if you also couple that with a couple of rounds of the Barometer survey, in which not just questions about perceptions of corruption, but also difficulty in obtaining certain public services, as well as with those who have had contact in trying to obtain some of those public services, the extent to which they have or not have paid a bribe, you do see all of these different sources of information converging on the same point, that really there is really a deep-rooted issue of bribe corruption within the public sector, but also in attempts to even get certain public services, that it involves some amount of of a bribe to get even some basic public services. So I'm not really surprised, because again, it just reinforces what studies, what other studies have found from Ghana Integrity Initiative, but also what the Barometer survey has been.
I thought, Prof, that sitting at the CDD, you will be a little surprised about this, because this time, this is actual, and it is 9 out of 10 who, have encountered this circumstance with public officers. Of course, we are not talking about the grand corruption, those that are perpetrated by especially the politicians who are so, like the CDD will talk about procurement politicians or governments. They are interested in procurement so that they can steal. You live in a country that you get surprised that it is surprising that when the state wants to make a purchase of something, it can't seem to do it directly. It needs a third person. It needs a middleman. And we know obviously what that always translates into. They get a middleman so that the money is funneled through that pocket, and then it is channeled back into the politician. The reason I said I felt you'll be a little surprised is that in the Afro Barometer that you did 2019, it was 6 in 10 Ghanaians, that's 61% of those you surveyed, that spoke about how corruption is somewhat or a lot worse, and yet they had the fear of some form of retaliation if they reported, to authorities, and so therefore will not do so. Now you have 9 out of 10.
Right, but at the same time, in terms of the actual incidents of bribery, and the reason why I'm saying I'm not surprised about that is, so in the Afro Barometer, there's a section where we ask if you've had contact with trying to get medical care, public school service, an identity document, police assistance, right? And if you look at each of those areas, for example, and then if you've had contact, the survey then asks, did you pay a bribe, right? How often did you pay a bribe? And then you see that for medical care, it's about 18%. This is even just based on the sample size used by the CDD. For public school services, it was an average of about maybe 21% over 3 rounds that question has been asked. To obtain an identity document, it was about an average of 25% saying they paid a bribe to obtain an identity document. To obtain police assistance, it was about 55%, but at least you do see the trajectory going down a little bit over about 6 rounds of the survey. So that is where my non-surprise is coming from, which is there is a reinforcement of what Afrobarometer has been finding. I guess we are now even getting a much better sense of the magnitude of what the issue actually looks like.
Okay.
But, from an Afrobarometer perspective, this is not too surprising.
Okay. Professor Kwesi Anyenini, what do you say after reading the report? What are your comments? Are you tired? Are you fed up? You going to give up on this so-called corruption war because it appears the war has been lost?
Well, Samson, thank you very much. And I think I've made this point very clearly, that corruption is the glue that binds this country together. That when we take corruption away, the edifice called Ghana Enterprise will collapse. And I think this report quantifies in very practical, commonsensical manner what corruption means and what bribery means, the extent of the problem, the category or the categories of individuals and institutions who are involved. So Samson, for me, this is one of the few times when state agents is bold enough to scientifically prove these allegations that people have been making. But it is not a surprise. I think the critical aspect, one, is the recognition that this is a problem. We've quantified it, and we brought it down in terms of developmental terms. How many schools can we build? The clinics, how many roads? But also more importantly, that this cuts across different shades of individuals and institutions. So, I mean, corruption creates insecurity, it creates a sense of social injustice, it creates inequalities in society. And for example, sometime last week, the level of embeddedness of corruption stroke bribery, I mean, there are conceptual differences slight between the two, was when a police officer accosted my friend and actually demanded that the bribe that he was asking for must be paid through Momo. So we have made a report about that because MTN was kind enough to send us some of the details. Okay, but there's an almost
Just over the weekend,
Yes.
there's a poor woman whose son is in school, and they went out, Scripture Union went to do something, and they were coming back, and it looks as if a group of, difficult people had done something, and people were running after them, and then one of these senior secondary school guys gets picked up, and he's said to be the one who has stolen somebody's bag with a phone and a laptop. They don't show the bag, they don't show anything. This woman gets called, she's worried. She drives all the way to Mampong, a police station there. And the police's offer is very simple. He got exams to write, he has to prepare. You are also worried. Yes, he says he's not guilty. We can take his statement, everything, and then go to court. But bring, is it 500 Ghana cedis? And that was it. That was the end of it.
Yeah. So Samson, so these are the instances. So the nurse will lose your file. Your old father or mother is going for inspection. Suddenly, the file cannot be found. My dear old friend, the policeman after Apam Junction, is still there intimidating people. But my shock in the quantification of the extent and the value of corruption that this report places on the table is that we are very good on the rhetorical side. Flowery rhetorics of established institutions whose willingness and capacity actually to come to grips with this problem is very weak.
Okay.
But of individual institutions and their willingness, even when the report is made. So here I want to appeal to the IGP, Dr. Dampare, to please let somebody contact me after this program so I can give the particular individual's name and the particular police station of the Spintex Road. You see, because Samson, the impunity is what is worrying me in this particular case. When the case was reported to me, I had spoken to this officer and said, look, we are all in the same business. Kindly don't do what you are doing because it flouts the law. It is against the regulations. You don't need to do that. He said, okay, I wouldn't do that. Only for him to go back and then intimidate this individual. Now, it was about, I think, an expired roadworthiness or something that had expired just about 22 hours earlier. The cost of renewal was 92 cedis, but this officer was demanding 100 cedis. And it just shows you the levels of impunity and the scale of the problematic. Okay. But kudos to those who did this report for placing a specific figure and a developmental value.
Okay, so hold on, we'll come to you. I want us to listen to Justice Emmanuel Yoni Kolendi of the Supreme Court of Ghana. Listen to him carefully, and there's a reason I say listen to him carefully, because often when it comes up, when the judiciary is mentioned, the police is mentioned, they are always on the defensive. But listen to Yoni Kolendi.
We fail to prevail in our fight against corruption. It is fast draining the public purse, it's creating barriers to economic development, decreasing effectiveness and efficiency of public services, increasing transactional costs, undermining equity and fairness in our society, making nonsense of due process and law, eroding the legitimacy of government, and will ultimately bring down our democracy and upset our national security. History will and ought to judge us harshly if we were to bequeath such a future to our children and posterity.
Well, so that's Justice Yoni Kolendi, and there's a bit more he said, and he spoke with a certain passion, and you could tell the anger in him. We have heard your views already. Yeah. beyond the passionate manner in which we have been talking about this, especially when issues come up, you have been here in the last month and this month, this Northern Development Authority, you know, theft. That is being dealt with kid gloves.
Exactly.
You know, and you are exasperated.
Yes.
Because you are talking, but those who must do something don't appear to be interested.
Yeah.
So what should we do beyond this survey?
Before we go beyond the survey, the first thing is, I think so far the president probably hasn't heard. Maybe we need to repeat it more forcefully for him to hear that he's part of the criminal syndicate at the Jubilee House. The president is certainly part. Look, all this corruption cannot happen without the president's involvement. Look, you know, even Manasseh did this thing about Zoom Lion, the spraying. When schools were being shut down, you know, the time of the corona, this virus, the pandemic broke, schools were being closed and we're going to come back after 3 months. What was the need for the spraying? You follow Manasseh's story, it lands on the president's desk. Other stories land on his desk, PDS and the rest. So the president, we have to say with all the energy we can master that he's part of that criminal syndicate. And that, look, we will not take this from him. He has to just step down.
Is it not the case that you are looking for swifter action and the president will use a process that is not as swift as you want? And will that warrant and justify your saying he's a part of this
the president is
criminal syndicate in the Jubilee House? So
he's not interested in any process because in opposition, okay, we can Google it, I'm sure viewers know. He said he will use the Anas principle when the president was coming to office, and that's why I voted for him, okay, with alacrity. He said he was going to use the Anas principle. He wasn't going to use this adversarial system. No, Anas principle. And what's the Anas principle? Private investigations. So the president should tell you and I, how many Anas principles has he used since he came? An abysmal failure.
In fact,
so this is a 419.
In fact, Anas has become an endangered species within his regime.
Excellent.
His Anas's security has been compromised largely. Anas is one of his right-hand men has been killed.
Ahmed Swale.
And the investigations have been very slow.
Yes. Pussyfooting on the investigations, right? Yes,
but the president is not the police to do that. So is it fair to get at him the way you have done?
Oh, Sam, fair? Fair is an understatement. We've given him all the opportunities in this world to do us right, but he has refused. He has refused. Elsewhere, the president would have even said, look, I will superintend over these investigations myself. But he's not bothered. You look, Sam, you look. We've placed you.
President superintending over an investigation?
Yes, superintend because you say every day.
You will be the same person to complain that is not due process.
Oh, no. Who will complain about this? Hey, when it comes to corruption, we all know. Like you said, you converted the Auditor General's billions into dollars. So you got 6 billion. But like the Ghana one is 48 billion. What is he doing? Didn't he end up sacking Domlevo when Domlevo was going after Osafu Mafu? When the evidence was very clear, he sacked Domlevo, right? So the president has to understand that, look, he has failed us. He has practiced 419 on us. He should go. We can't take that for him. He should just resign.
That comparison you make, what can the president do to the Auditor General now? So that if Domlevo was issuing surcharges and disallowances and he was getting money back, and this Auditor General has simply refused. It is taking people like you, Occupy Ghana, and now the Citizen Coalition, the GII, all of them coming together. Now I hear they have actually a plan to go to his office. Yes. I don't know what else to do. What can the president do to the Auditor General that will not attract your wrath in the same way it did when he, touched Domelevo?
Okay, so the Auditor General, in this particular case, he has to give him all the resources he requires. Because you know what, coincidentally, you know that last year's audit reports are supposed to have been, they are due. But as of now, more than 3 weeks on, the reports are not due. So that tells you that it appears the Auditor General himself is probably under-resourced, okay? So he needs more resources. More resources. Otherwise, the fight against corruption...
Does he need resources to do surcharges and disallowances?
No, not that one. I'm talking about the fact that the audit reports are not ready. Okay, maybe I didn't get the question well. The such as the disallowances. Yes, we need to push him more. That's why we've requested the Civil Society Coalition. We are going to visit him. We want to push more so that he should employ more people. More people. Maybe if he doesn't have the capacity, Sankofa, nothing prevents the Auditor General from saying, look, he wants to engage Domlevo as a consultant. And also, Chairman Sabunsu supports that we should give the Auditor General more independence. And that one, thankfully, is not even an entrenched provision, Article 195. So you see, Monday, July 18th, page 19. Amend Article 195 to guarantee independence of Auditor General, majority leader advocates, blah, blah, blah. So, Sam, my point is that the current Auditor General can engage Domlevo. Okay, he didn't sack Domlevo, so I don't see. Of course, we know that practically it's because this current Auditor General is their man. But look, he can rise above the partisanship and appoint Domlevo as a consultant to help him. Look, let's look at this. Trump. When Trump appointed the Attorney General, between Sessions and then the other one, the AG, when he had to appoint a special prosecutor and everybody knew that he didn't want to do it, the Attorney General allowed the Deputy Attorney General to appoint James Comey as the investigator to investigate the Trump matters, right? So you see that in America they have several examples. Yes, the president is appointed you. If you think maybe you are too close to him, you won't do, you let your deputy do it. So I am thinking that in this case, if the Auditor General himself doesn't want to do it, he can allow one of the deputies, appoint Domlevo, who has a track record. He's done it before, so bring him in and he will do it. And the president can't stop. Look, I think the Auditor General needs to rise above partisanship. Because if you look at the circumstances in which he was brought in to come and whitewash the mess, it suggests that he's very, very close to them.
All right, now let me get to
Professor. Sam, yes. So your main question was that beyond this report, what should we do? And so beyond the report, the number one is that
I'll come back.
The president should go.
Yes.
Before we come to constitutional review. The president should go. That is it. Let's repeat with all the energy. General Ankara, president in 1960, resigned over a bribery allegation that if you convert the 6,000 Ghana cedis, that 6,000 cedis, somebody says it's not more than $21,000 today. Allegation, he resigned. So let's go, $20,000 allegation.
The president has given you the office of special prosecutor. You are excited about it.
Amidu says the president is the mother serpent of corruption.
In fact, it is the special prosecutor that is handling the
NDA matter,
which you are excited about.
I'm excited about Mr.
Right.
Jabe.
Then beyond that, he has also approved your right to information law, the mother law of all anti-corruption crusade. Now he's been doing some things, including amending your criminal and other offenses, your criminal criminal law. And he has done an amendment to bring accepting and giving bribe or influence of a public officer.
But Samson, laws don't implement
12 years, at least 12 years, or not more than 25 years.
We don't want longer terms. We want retrieval of the money, and we already have sufficient laws to retrieve.
This is his commitment.
Recovery. No. Samson, this special prosecutor's office is empty. Please, Samson, let's repeat. Special prosecutor's office is empty. He doesn't have enough men, no cars. It's such a problem. I wonder how Kisi works. I've been there a number of times. You see, and that's how come the investigations, though they are trying, with some policemen, there are few. They are still trying to recruit.
Okay.
That's why Matinamidu says the president is the mother serpent of corruption. Now I understand it.
To add to that, I just wanted to say that we make the laws, that is true, but laws do not implement themselves. We need logistics to ensure that we are activating these laws. And that is why in most of the UNCAC reviews, the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, the peer reviews we have had, all of them continue to indicate that we have very fantastic laws in place. We have the institutional architecture developed very well set up. We have, in most of the instances, the human capacity as well to do the job. But then when it comes to enforcement, actual implementation of what we say we should be doing, then we are found wanting because we have serious challenges navigating some of these laws. They've put in place so many gaps in there, too much excessive executive power, which can circumvent all these beautiful laws. People are afraid because they know their appointment is based on the president being happy with them and continuing to remain so. And so they would not do much to piss off the president, unfortunately. And that is what we have to contend with. People know that if they have certain political...
these civil society organizations, you appear to know too much. And the president has told you that to your face. You appear to know too much. Allow the system to work, including somebody like myself. When they were doing these amendments to elevate so-called the punishment to where it is, I said this was unnecessary because the law already provides for it.
It's there.
You are just seeking to streamline it. It doesn't change anything because as at the time we were amending the law to say if you give bribe and so on,
the 25 years.
You go
It's
either 20,
there.
either 12 or 25 years. It's already there in the law, except that you
and who wants longer prison sentences?
Anyway, let me go to Professor Enim himself. Prof, you set out to do this work. Were you surprised at the at the outcome?
Thank you, Samson, and good morning to listeners. Samson, let me begin by saying a big thank you to...
Yes, go ahead.
...to previous speakers on this subject matter. Clearly, the report has received the traction that Ghana Statistical Service expects. I would say I was pretty surprised because, as was mentioned by previous speakers, this is not the first time that Ghana is embarking on a study like this. But what we've sought to do now is how comprehensive we need to look at payment and, more importantly, the quantification. And Samson, that is what I want to emphasize on in my submission. During the release, what we did was to look at the issue of corruption from 5 perspectives, focusing on bribe payment. Specifically, we looked at the scope of bribe payment, who takes bribe, how bribes works, the gender dimensions of it, and the issues of nepotism and vote buying. What I want to emphasize are the numbers, and I really would want us to have the conversation around the numbers rather than the narratives. As was mentioned earlier on, we measured the payment of bribe from the perspective that the respondent had made a contact with a public official and actually had to pay bribe or was asked to pay bribe and refused. We need to be clear in our minds that the definition of bribe payment here is strictly when somebody had to pay something on top of the required fee, and this was done in the course of, prior to the course of the service delivery or during the service delivery. Where the respondent was not clear, we emphasize that if you, the respondent, felt after the work at a very later stage, decided to give something to the public official and is not connected to the service delivery, we excluded that. So it is important we are clear in our minds what that definition is. And this puts the prevalence of bribe payment at 26.7%. For us at Ghana Statistical Service, the question is, what does this mean? And this is where we always say that it's not always about the levels, it is about the trends, or it is about the distribution. And if our conversation doesn't get into the trends and the distribution, policy would not be able to address the issue. So for instance, if you look at previous exercises related to the issue of bribe payment, in 2017-2018, the Ghana Living Standards Survey had a module in there on corruption, governance, and peace. And from that, the question was different from what we asked during the current survey, but for us to have a sense of the trend, we incorporated the same questions that were asked during the Ghana Living Standards Survey in 2017 in the current survey. so that we begin to get a sense of where we've come from and moving forward ahead of not only the SDG indicated, but as a country, how we measure our progress. The Ghana Living Standard Survey looked at it from the perspective of households, not from the perspective of individuals. And again, it didn't denominate the measurement with whether you've had a contact with a public official or not. If you look at it from that perspective, in 2016-2017, it was 46.8% of people who were always paying bribe, occasionally paying bribe, half of the time paying bribe. And if you look at this same question in 2021, based on the study that we did, this figure had reduced to 37.9%. The key question here is the 7.9 percentage point difference that we've recorded between 2017 and 2021, does it commensurate the interventions that we've put in place, both in terms of policies and both in terms of the financial interventions? And this is where we want policy to engage. Samson, the second issue is, once we are having this conversation and we are not looking at where is this happening, policy will be difficult to address it. And that is why we always place emphasis from the perspective of geographical distribution of the prevalence, and also from a sector point of view, what is happening. Keep in mind that the prevalence is 26.7%. But if you look at its occurrence across the 16 regions, we have close to over 40 percentage point difference between the region that has the highest prevalence and the region that has the least prevalence, which are respectively the Western North, 53.2%, and Bono East region, about 11%. So again, this is the information that policy require to say that if we want to tackle it, where do we go? Then the second issue, which has attracted a lot of discussions across the airwaves, is the issue of police and who is doing that. Please, let's be circumspect when we are dealing with these numbers. We put out the prevalence and highlighted police leading, followed by the Ghana Immigration Service and the Ghana Revenue Authority. And then the list of it is the elected government officials, with a percentage difference of, again, about 50 percentage point difference. This conversation in isolation, without looking at issues around the frequency of bribe payment, the amount of bribe payment, would not help policy in any way. So in the same report, we clearly document the average number of bribes that are paid across these institutions and the average amount that is paid. And then that leads us to the 5 billion that we have talking about now. Permit me to correct this. I see that in our headline statement, we are saying the 5 billion is being attributed to both private and public. It's strictly from public officials, what respondents said they had paid to public officials. It's less what we're going to get if we add what we are getting for private sector. So the point that I'm making is that all these numbers have to be placed in its right context. Otherwise, we would not be able to measure whatever progress that we are making. I would say the last thing, and then I'm happy to speak to the issues further. The 5 billion that we are all touting around, you did mention 3 billion from the Auditors General. Now we are saying 5 billion. The question is, what does that mean for us as a country? And for us at Ghana Statistical Service, we would want to benchmark this with quite a number of indicators, i.e., what is our minimum wage? If your minimum wage is about 13.53 Ghana cedis per day, what is the average of 348 bribe payment relates to? If this 5 billion is 32.7% of the Ministry of Health's annual budget for 2021, what does that mean? If our GDP for last year was 175 billion, this 5 billion, how does it come in? It will not just go and add to it, but you need to look at how it would change it if we had invested it in an area which is not an underground economy, for which reason it's not reflected in our GDP. So I really would want us to play with the numbers, talk more about the numbers, both from a disaggregation point of view, and then we can guide policymakers in terms of what they actually need to do. Thank you.
And what you just spoke about You were talking, for example, about where you make, is it you that made that comparison? I read that from another place, where you make a comparison with what the Ministry of Education needs, how much money it needs for the year's budget. And when you take this 5 billion, what it means then that we have lost. And when we are talking about the Auditor General in my reference, we're talking about the Auditor General's report for 2016 to 2020, and the cumulative amount stolen or lost is 48 billion Ghana cedis, but converted to approximately 6 billion Ghana cedis, and not 3 billion. Now, you did the ranking, so to speak. Police officers, 53.2%. The Ghana Immigration Service Office, 37.4%. The Ghana Revenue Authority Custom Officers, 33.6%. Lands Commission, 32.4%. The DVLA, 29.5%. Passport Agency officials, 29%. Prosecutors, judges, or magistrates, 22.3%. Then you have the National Intelligence Bureau. Some people are shocked. National Intelligence Bureau is such a serious place, and people are asking, collecting, and taking bribes. The National Road Safety Authority, supposed to stop the carnage on our roads. 17.8%. Prison officials, what are they taking the money for? They are supposed to keep the prisoners in there. So 17.0%. The ministry, department, and agency officials, 12.7%. People coming to ask for basic services that they can do without asking or accepting, or, then you have the tax office of the GRA, 12.7%. The armed forces, members of the armed forces, what are they doing with this? 10.3%. Welfare officials, social welfare. Social welfare, the most impoverished people are the ones who go there to seek, services. And social welfare, 10.3%. Now, teachers, lecturers, professors. Now, here's my question, Prof. Does this tell you that this has gotten into endemic levels? Is that a picture you get? And what are your suggested solutions?
So I'll look at it from two perspectives. One is the reasons why the issue of bribe payment is not reported. So with all the prevalence that you've talked about across the institutions and the national figure of 26.7%, it's only 3% of the respondents who indicated that they had reported the incidence of bribe payment. So now we are looking at it from the perspective of those who are collecting it and those who are paying it, and whether those who are paying are willing to report it to help curb the menace of bribe payment. And the two top reasons why they gave for not reporting, that is the over 96% that indicated not reporting. The first being that we're not going to get anywhere with it if we report. And then the second reason is that is the system. That is what we are living with. Once you get respondents telling you that, then it means the issue of bribe payment is becoming a norm. The other statistic that we put out there was to get the reason underpinning the payment of bribe. We had about over a third, specifically about 33.7% of the respondents indicating that they pay bribe to hasten the process of the service that they require from the public official, and then another 10% to finalize it. But we had more than 10% again indicating that it is a norm. I mean, if you don't pay it, you don't get things done. So with these indicators, it is a bit frightening, and it's worrying that if you're not careful, this has become part of our ways of doing things in the country. Samson, I'll stretch the response a little bit. That's why I want us to really engage with the disaggregates, which we have all in the report. If you disaggregate the issue of bribe payment across different age groups, the highest is among the young adults, where we have about 30% of them, specifically of the prevalence of bribe payment. And if you take the 65 plus, we have about 17.6%. So if you look at the peak occurring around the young adults, then if you really want to curb the menace, then you need to look at a long-term strategy. Because the age groups tells us that it is something that is gradually creeping into our system, especially when you have the peak around the young adults. And one of the things that I highlighted during the releases, for us at Ghana Statistical Service, this is not an investigative research. This is a statistical product. And one of the things that we should not miss out is the issue around public education. And let us look forward to the report that we're going to put out on the other components of this survey, which has to do with opinions and attitudes towards institutions mandated to address issues around this, and the access to the justice system that we have in the country. We have other models on safety and things that we're going to put out there. But we need to reconcile all this and understand why people who are paying bribes, people who are being asked to pay bribes, are not willing to take the issue forward to help address it. And one of the issues will be public education on this subject matter. Thank you.
Did you find, in fact, that it was easier to bribe the judicial system, as in court officials and judges? Because that's been said repeatedly in the media since the release.
Specifically, there wasn't any attempt to capture how easy it is to take bribe across the various institutions. But what I want us to take advantage of the current report is not just the prevalence, but the frequency. So one can argue that if you look at the frequency of bribe payment across the institutions, would it be a proxy to measure the ease of taking bribe from across the institutions? And the other is the amount of bribe across the institutions. And again, that is why let us not look at the prevalence in isolation. Samson, the average bribe payment of 5 across the those who paid bribe ranges from 1 to over 12. So you see that variety. And if you look at the amount that is paid on the average across the institutions, the police institution comes 9th. And we have the Lands Commission having an average of about 1,669 Ghana cedis, and the police service 220 Ghana cedis, the least being other health workers 91 Ghana cedis on the average. So again, you see this wide variation between the average amounts paid and as I said, the frequency of payment. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Martin wants to come in. I wanted to take a break here and return to my guest again to continue this discussion, particularly looking at how to not return to this ritual again. And as if I have any hope that we will not return to it. Yes, okay, Martin. Yes.
Okay, I wanted to ask Prof about the National Investigative Bureau.
Yes.
Yes, clarify what they have on it.
Okay, so Prof, if you are listening, Martin wants to know when you refer to the National Investigative Bureau, a very serious, intelligence institution being ranked in this thing. Well, how exactly is it? what is their case? Well, if they are bribing judges,
Samson, again,
are you surprised about the Bureau?
Yes. Yes. Again, this is a household-based data collection. It's not from the institution point of view, so we need that clarity. So once we visit the households, we ask them that question that I put forward earlier on. In the past 12 months, have you had to pay additional money to get a service from a public institution rendered? A service that has to be rendered by a public institution. And then we run through different institutions, of which the National Investigative Bureau is one of them.
Okay, let's listen to Justice Yoni Kolendi again, and then after that we are going on a break. When we return, my guests will take rounds again, more particularly to try and help us better diagnose with solutions. We'll be right back. Let's listen to Yoni Kolendi.
We fail to prevail in our fight against corruption. It is fast draining the public purse, is creating barriers to economic development, decreasing effectiveness and efficiency of public services, increasing transactional costs, undermining equity and fairness in our society, making nonsense of due process and law, eroding the legitimacy of government, and will ultimately bring down our democracy and upset our national security. History will and ought to judge us harshly if we were to bequeath such a future to our children and posterity. That said, I must also say that in Ghana, the word corruption appears to be a word that is often being used without a clear understanding of the nuances involved. Allegations and counter-allegations bordering on corruption have often bedeviled our airwaves and public discourse, and I believe this fuels the perception of corruption in Ghana. I think the National Corruption Survey that is about to be launched today is a verifiable attempt to give stakeholders and the public, for the first time, some scientific basis to validate perceptions on the prevalence or otherwise of corruption in Ghana and some of the sectors that are captured in the survey. Ladies and gentlemen, my understanding is that the formulation and adaptation of the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan as a comprehensive strategy was informed principally by the need to expose and combat corruption and to make it a low-gain and high-risk activity. This, of course, would enhance professionalism, effectiveness, integrity, accountability, transparency, etc. in all aspects of our endeavor to build a Ghana that gives hope to our people. However, we cannot do this successfully if we do not measure corruption with a view to revealing our vulnerabilities and developing the necessary anti-corruption responses. This, to me, is the utility of such an important survey. It will give all of us a wake-up call to appreciate the thinking and sentiments of people on the streets across our country. May I take this opportunity to implore all stakeholders and the public to critically evaluate and reflect on this survey and hopefully accept the results as they are from reputable organizations such as the Commission on Human Rights, the Ghana Statistical Services, and the UNOCD, and to use this in informing our strategies in our effort against this.
I make these solemn pledges to you, the people of Ghana. To all those who have been dismayed by the level of corruption under this NDC government, I ask for your vote. I am committed to fighting corruption vigorously, and I shall exact the same high standards for members of my government as I have set for myself. I pledge that an Akufo-Addo government, which will be composed of a competent, dynamic team of men and women, will protect the public purse and ensure value for money in all financial transactions for the nation.
You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. Now, there's a reason that we just played what you just listened. This was the president's charge, and many analysts have said that the NPP won the elections in 2016 on the back of the corruption campaign, because Ghanaians were tired about the corruption issues that they were hearing. Now, a president who gave this charge, how can you at this time, like Martin said a while ago, says he should just drop the ball, so to speak, because he has failed? Professor Anyenini, I start with you. And my guests on this show this morning are Professor Samuel Kobina Enim, who is government statistician, Professor Kwesi Enim, who is Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, Dr. John Osai Kwapong, who is political scientist, Democracy and Development Fellow, CDD, Ghana. He likes to talk about research methods. Some of us fear research methods. Mary Awalana Ada is programs manager, Ghana Integrity Initiative, and Martin Pebu is lawyer and rights activist. Yes, Professor Kwesi Enim, this was the president's charge, and you analysts have said largely that this is how the NPP won the elections. And he's done RTI, he's done, like I've listed them. What should the president do to show that he's doing something about corruption?
Well, thank you very much, Samson. And I like the song that played along with the president's speech. In 2000, when the NPP was desperate to win power, this was their swan song, Erade Kasa. And when the good Lord spoke and they won, they sang a song in celebration, Abemwerie. And Ghanaians have always remembered that. And when there was this powerful message of an anti-corruption driven governance processes, it resonated with Ghanaians. And people thought, we want a country that is governed transparently, in which its institutions function, in which we come into public service for what it is, to serve and to use that unique opportunity given to us by our fishermen, our farmers, our market women, whose taxes have given us our elite education to transform lives. We seem to see public rhetoric as an end in itself that flourishes of passing bills, of establishing institutions, and creating a make-believe world that we are serious is an end in itself. And I think my near namesake, Professor Nim, talks very eloquently about the disaggregation of the figures, the quantification, and he consistently reminds us of the policy dimension and the need to give those who design and implement policy the instruments to work. And there I beg to differ slightly. Corruption is an interwoven, integrated network in which, more often than not, those who don't want the institutions and the policies to work are themselves interested in ensuring that the institutional processes and mechanisms do not work. So there's a direct correlation between institutional weakness, institutional fragility, and eventually institutional incapacity and unwillingness to deliver that public service in fighting corruption. There are oft stated reasons about lack of resources, logistics, blah, 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 blah. They don't work. It's just talk. So, Samson, you and I will be having this conversation by the time I retired. Will people continue to threaten me for saying what I do? Yes. Will I continue to stop talking? No, because I perceive myself as a man of integrity, and I think Enterprise Ghana is much more important. So we need to ask ourselves, how do we move away from the rhetorical flourishes and disincentivize people from paying that bribery or engaging in that corruption? And I think the conceptual exercise that Professor Enim spoke about first is key. And I want to spend 5 seconds on this. Corruption is the dishonest or fraudulent conduct by those in power involving bribery. Bribery is the offering, giving, receiving of anything of value with the intention of inducing a person to act in a particular way. Now, there's a certain interdependence and interrelationship between the two. Okay, and it is critical and crucial that in talking about this, that we move beyond the talk and to say, how do we disincentivize people from first paying bribes? Now, sometimes if you haven't been at the forefront of reporting corruption in your own institution, of reporting bribery to an institutional head, and felt on your body the hatred, the anger, the specific attempts at destroying you, either through poisoning, either through fidgeting with your car brakes, either through getting people to intimidate you, or powerful people calling you after interviews to intimidate you about your job, then talking anti-corruption and fighting bribery becomes nothing but rhetorical flourish. You've got to feel it on your body and in your soul to begin to know the dangers and the entrenchment of these processes. And Samson, we are far from scratching the surface. We find it satisfactory that we keep talking. Kudos to Professor Enim and his team. Now we have a scientific basis. Now, when you have your most critical national institutions, those who protect, those who should resolve conflicts, and those who should be engaged in ensuring that the law is upheld, all of them tinted with now this scientific study, then we have an existential problem on our hands. Because how do ordinary people perceive, and now this is no more a perception, that when we pay that 10 cedis, when we pay that 100 cedis to Julius Pinkra of the Vivian Farm police station, that makes me feel insecure. That reduces the quality of law enforcement that I get. that makes me feel a less worthy citizen of this country. It undermines my sense of loyalty to the state. And I have a sense that my taxes don't matter. In the end result, our willingness to be loyal to the state becomes undermined. And that is the extent of the danger of corruption and bribery.
Okay. Dr. Osai-Kwapo, my sense of this survey is that it involves much the petty corruption rather than the grand corruption. And yet, you would see that the conversation everywhere, it is the high-level grand corruption that is gaining attention and criticism. Now, in the Barometer 2019 that I referred to, as many as 6 out of 10 people said, yes, we are aware that corruption is all over the place. And yet, even if we have encountered it, we will not report it for fear of some form of retaliation. How do we then end up blaming the people at the top and the duty bearers for, the worsening situation of corruption? Will it be fair?
Well, I think institutional leaders also do bear some responsibility in this conversation and this problem that we're dealing with, right? And then the other thing that I also want us to bring attention back to, which has been a concern for me, is if you look at the Ghana Statistical Services report, I was quite intrigued that certain public institutions that have low contact rates with the public had some high levels of bribery rates and also had high value for bribery rates. So I think if you look at the reporting, in as much as the police service has been highlighted, you start to realize that the cost of transacting business with certain institutions that have low contact rates is quite high for the citizen.
Especially the National Intelligence Bureau.
Precisely, or even if you look at prosecutors, magistrates, right? A contact rate of 1.7%, but a bribery rate of 22%. So you place the burden then on institutional leaders on how to administratively deal with some of these things. And I'll have to bring you back to Barometer as well. So for example, we'll have to triangulate all of these key data points that we've been gathering. Because if you look at Barometer, those who have had contact, for example, in seeking police assistance, 59% do say that they do face difficulty in getting police assistance. 53% say that they do find difficulty in getting an identity document. 40% say they face difficulty in getting medical care. So you ask yourself then that, what can we do administratively to lower some of these barriers to getting access to public services that would help us then reduce these bribery rates and the high value of some of these bribes that are being paid as captured in the Ghana Statistical Services report? But that's, for me, where we are now, right?
Yes.
That we now have key reports that we can juxtapose together to ask ourselves administratively, what can we do?
Yes, and Doc, in that regard, can't this government take some credit for the quote-unquote massive, you call it digitalization of systems to remove, person-to-person contact at the ports, in fact, in the courts? All these things are being rolled out all over the place.
Exactly, right? Tools like that do help. And I think that it's an important step in, like you said, reducing that person-to-person contact. Because again, if you throw in the reasons why people states that they give bribes in this report from GSS, the top reason is to facilitate a given process. So again, you have information about difficulty in accessing and gaining public service, at the same time resulting in these high rates of bribery. Then you have to ask yourself, are measures like digitalization going to help reduce that person-to-person contact, right? Because hopefully and then the way the bribery works as per the survey is that it is demanded by the institution. So hopefully if you remove the person-to-person contact, hopefully a computer cannot ask you for a bribe, right? That it's so impersonal that some of these administrative bottlenecks can.
I thought, for example, that the passport process is now fully digitalized. I don't go to any electricity vendor or office to pay my bills. I don't go to any water company physically to pay my bills. So why is this still this really bad?
So then you also then have to ask, for those who don't have to do that personal interfacing to access these public services, like you said, are spared the burden of having to be asked for a bribe and paying it. So then we also have to probe further to ask ourselves, who is really carrying this burden, right? Is it those then who don't have access to the technology and therefore have to do the face-to-face interaction to get some of these services, which is then placing a burden on them? So again, as we move the agenda forward in terms of digitalizing a lot of public services, how do we also ensure that we integrate enough of the population in there so that there are not these barriers and not a segment of the population ending up then shouldering this burden of how do I access even something as basic as police assistance?
Well, as for the police aspect, don't talk about that. That place is just too terrible. And because of where I sit, as in my practice as a lawyer, in my firm, I'm getting stories every day. People are calling you, and by the time they are talking to you, they have already paid to a police officer. And then you want to instigate something, and they say, "Oh, please don't do it." You know, everybody is afraid. I don't know what it is. Okay, so now, Mary, there's a way I'm thinking about things. You, the anti-corruption crusaders, have been telling us for a while now that as much as how much in billions of dollars is lost to the country or unaccounted to the country each year because of corruption. Is it 2 or 3 billion each year? How much of that involves grand corruption rather than petty corruption, which appears to be the focus of this survey? Bribery, extortion, the brown envelope, little here and there. How much of that will you think is involved here? And then we can look at how to resolve it.
Okay, so let me quickly say that even though we haven't documented the quantities or if you are putting it together, the issues around petty corruption is very insignificant. However, it is the component of that makes the issue around corruption very visible. If you take issues around procurement corruption, it constitutes more than 70% on one of the researches I have read from the World Bank and also Transparency International. Procurement corruption is huge, constituting sometimes in one procurement, somebody is getting about 10% of the sum. So if you are getting a 1.2 million worth of contract and you are paying as much as 20, sometimes 30% of it as a bribe, compared to a policeman who is standing on my road around Fise, ensuring that he's getting 5 cedis, 2 cedis, that's a very insignificant amount. And so for us, we believe that even though the petty corruption issues are very minimal, we as well need to talk about them because that's where the issues around reputational damage happens. Because people see that happening. I was just thinking when Prof was speaking about some of the exposés that have come up from this media house, for instance, in the instances of Kwete doing the Tamale Teaching Hospital, where the midwives were taking some monies and it resulted in a very huge expose. You remember also the issues around the whistleblower issues around CAF, where small monies were taken and he decided to report. Unfortunately, it became a whole issue. These are small monies. But then let's go back to thinking about what the ABAJ case was about. Look at the number of contracts that he was able to get. And then even though he didn't do anything with execution, he was able to get some percentages selling back. And so as a middleman, he was gaining so much through corruption because he had opportunity and he was well placed. There are other huge ones like the Galamsey expose that happened. And in that, you remember it was reported. Unfortunately, nothing has happened. We also see that documented in most of the infractions. And let me say the Auditor General that you have cited copiously this morning shows that issues around, most of them are not, you would say 6 billion, but in some of the instances, you would say they are not pure corruption related, misapplication of funds and others are not. But
that's why I talk about stolen or lost.
Or lost, yes, to the state. So if you take the issues purely around the corruption arena, then you are talking about huge amounts that get lost through procurement, and some people intentionally through the ghost names in the system, which continue to get perpetuated. As to what we are doing about it, we have continuously spoken. And you remember we have been to Shraj. Recently, there is another one that came up and we've been speaking about it. I remember the said gentleman went on another radio station to say Miranda has no integrity, to talk about him not having integrity. When a public officer, in the discharge of his duty, decides to also set up a company just in like manner as the PPA gentleman. And this company gets PFJ contracts. He admits in the expose that he was the person who facilitated that, and this is huge sums of money. Unfortunately, we haven't heard anything yet. This was another area where we did advocacy, spoke to the issues extensively. Unfortunately, our president has not done much. And so for us, we believe that quantifying the sums is important, but action to ensure that we reduce the reputational damage to this country, which we don't have much of anymore as a people out there. And let me use the CPI to state categorically that we are not doing too well when it comes to the fight against corruption. And it is because we are being cited always for issues around our lack of accountability when it comes to public office. And you know the CPI focuses on public office. We are looking at the independence of our audit institutions, which bring these figures, and yet nothing is done about. And so for us, we believe that quantifying the amounts is important, but then there is no small bribe. And for us, there is no big bribe, even though the small bribes are just small. It is what we hear about. The big bribes are equally important, and those are the ones we believe the strategists of our time would need to help us initiate some of the investigations and expedite them so that the trust of the people would then be gained. And we believe that the president would be the one who would help us in this cause. So when the president has cause to make pronouncements such as civil society, you believe you have all the experts, you know everything. Even though you've told me, yes, it is the people of Ghana who decided to vote me into power. And so I am working for the people of Ghana. We have information, we share it out there. We say the issues around grant corruption, particularly around procurement, which is so very huge, must be dealt with if this president would redeem his name. As things stand, if we want to catalog the issues around grand corruption, even though they are not as many as the petty ones, it would constitute more than 80% of the corruption in this country. And it is only the president who the buck stops with who can help us to deal with it.
Interesting there, Mary. And okay, forgive me. I'm live on TV. I was going to ask a question, but
Please do.
I censor myself and I don't ask it. You know, was the president not right somewhat when he told you people off, so to speak? In part, he had said that some of the CSOs, you know, he had doubts about what they really stood for. He spoke about some of them having campaigned against him and having done the partisan politicking thing. And so it's difficult for him to take advice on how to deal with corruption and good governance from them. Was he not right then?
I believe that is very wrong on the part of the president to think like that. Civil society exists to prefer alternative views. And we exist to ensure that when we see that things are not going right, we definitely must be known to speak to them. And so for people having their political views, for some of us, we continue to say that we are non-political. And if you realize recently when we set up the Citizens Coalition, that is one of the criteria. We want to remain so because we believe that therein we can remain independent and make our advocacy count. We represent the people of Ghana. We are citizens, first of all. And so when things go well, we benefit. And if they are not going well, we are also at the worst for it. As things stand, we all buy fuel. We are suffering. We all go to the markets. We are all suffering. And so if we have views and we don't espouse same, believing that they are the best for this country, then we don't know what we are talking about. For us, we were involved in the shaping of the OSP Act. And if you read it, if you go through it, you would realize that capacity of civil society to support government is very high and credible. And so for the president to think that when our views counter what he believes, then it means we are against him and his government. It's one of the very unfortunate statements to be made by the president. It is a fact that the citizens of Ghana voted for him. We are citizens. Martin is a citizen. He says he voted for him in 2016. Yeah. And is he not a citizen?
And campaigned for him in 2020.
They did not, did his vote not count in him winning. I may say that I do not take these political issues very seriously because I believe that I am a Ghanaian, I'm doing anti-corruption and I must remain focused. And so for the president to say that, I believe he should rethink, have a rethink, and be more open to listen to contrary opinions, be they from opposition or whoever.
Yeah, when
it is important.
For example, there have been situations where we have heard groups like the Africa Center for Energy Policy speak about energy matters. And then when the president is questioning, he says, well, there are also experts in my government. He's right, is he not?
It is right that he would have experts in government. But then, unfortunately, remember that in the dispensation we serve in, people are very, very economical with the truth. Sometimes I wonder, these are my personal views, sometimes I wonder if the experts around our president tell him the actual truth or the things that are happening and which they study and prefer their opinions on, if they are actually giving him this information. Because it is so glaring out there that things are not working as they should. But the president comes and then he speaks as if he is speaking from another planet and not Ghana. And even though these experts are there, I believe that for the president to do very well, he should also listen to others who are saying things that are contrary. Is it that every other person is lying except those around him? It is good to trust people you have appointed. Yes, because without trust, most definitely you cannot work together.
That's right.
But it is also very true that when others speak, they have been the observers, they have experienced it, and they are the better judges of the
Let me come to Martin now, and then after that we can take some break and return to Swami and what the MPP MPs in what the MPP MPs in Kumasi or Ashanti region are seeking to do. And Martin, somewhat, I've asked you a question and you say, well, it's not really about the laws and making the laws. But I suppose you agree that it's important to make the laws because that becomes the basis.
Yes.
And having known you, for example, we passed the Domestic Violence Act. There was a need to set up a fund. For how many years? Nobody bothered. You had to go to court on your own as a citizen.
Yes.
Use your own resources.
Yes.
To fight for the court to say it should be set up. And when you won that victory, you still had to continue to fight for it to be set up.
And still fighting for them to operationalize.
And you're still fighting.
Yeah, in law it's set up, but there's very little money in the operationalization.
So here is my question. It does appear that there's a need to incentivize reporting corruption and corrupt conduct.
Yes.
It is the best way because if it incentivizes, people will do a lot more. The Barometer 2019, which said that 6 out of 10 said they will not report for fear of some retaliation. It's been 18 years or so, 2006, we passed the Whistleblowers Act. The Whistleblowers Act provides protection, including state security against harassment, victimization, etc. at your workplace. If you have seen your boss is doing wrong and you go and speak about it. That doesn't appear to be enforced.
Exactly.
The Act also provides for a reward fund. So that fund is meant to motivate reporting of corruption. And people can gain as much as 10% for reporting corruption. So if you are like Manasseh, you're a journalist. But if you are Manasseh and you blew the whistle on Jida and we ended up recovering, $1 million, you can look to get at least 20% out of that.
10%.
All of that, 10% out of that. All of that are not being done. So what do you think we should do again? Because we still talk about law and there is a need for the law. You have been talking about the constitutional provision, for unexplained wealth.
Article 286 clause 4.
Right.
What again, right? So, Sam, number one, citizens should be more engaging. They are doing well. You can see increasing. The nation is changing. Yeah, you go on social media. I think citizens are engaging more now than in the previous administration. I mean, talking about 2012 to 2016. I see the country is changed. We are far more vigilant now, but we are not yet there. We are not yet there. So what I can say is that we should continue. And your program, you've done well. This Whistleblowers Act, Sam, I think I've heard you a number of times on it. You've referred to it, and still the fund is not being set up. I remember even this case you were involved in, the National Service case, where you were representing some of the accused persons. The person who blew the whistle, at a point, he came to me. I wrote to this Attorney General. I didn't know there was already a lawyer in it. Subsequently, when I saw that, I had to withdraw. The lawyer has been battling to get the whistleblower's payment. He died, and his family has been following. I'm not sure they've been paid. So you see, this national service.
I've tried to get some people their whistleblowers' payments.
Excellent.
It's almost like.
So, you see, we are back to Nader's table. We are back to.
And those people have given up.
Yes,
they blew whistle on companies that were not paying their tax, and the state got them and got a lot of money out of those companies. But the GRA has its own method, and then it's paying them peanuts. So they didn't appreciate that. Their lives are at stake.
You see that thing? Yes. So we are back to President Kufuor's table. We are back to his desk because he said he will implement all the laws. He will make corruption very unattractive, right? And here is the case. He's not doing anything about the Whistleblowers Act, not doing it about Domestic Violence Act. You see, so here is the president. Sam, I don't know how many times I have to repeat that. Look, the president just has to go He has to go. That's what millions of Ghanaian citizens are saying. Look, and if the president doubts it, he can let us have a pool, okay, to be supervised by him. He will see his own people. Day in, day out.
That will not solve your corruption problem in this country.
Now, I want to try somebody else because he's shown he's not able to. Baumia is also shown he's not able to because the NDA matter.
So what are you asking for? You have voted for a president. He's voted for 4 years. There's no elections yet. Are you saying parliament impeachment, which you will never get? What do you want?
No, he can just voluntarily go, and that would be the best, and he will get an applause. If Akufo-Addo and Baumia step down today, they will get the best applause, and history would, forgive them for all the rot they've superintended over, because we will get a new opportunity for somebody else to try. Sam, let me add this point that, you see, because when you do that, Akufo-Addo should remember, Lieutenant General Ankara, he resigned over a bribery allegation of just about $20,000. Maybe if the conversion is wrong. At that time, it was 6,000 cedis. 1969, 6,000 cedis. Ankara left. General Ankara, president of Ghana, head of state, after the Nkrumah, overthrow, blah, blah, blah. He was there as president, okay? He resigned. Akufo-Addo can learn from that. Baumia can learn from it. They should go. Sam, can you people play this song? The Baumia's rhyme. Teachers are suffering. Doctors are suffering. Lawyers are suffering. Kayaye suffering. Shoemakers suffering. People in Trotro suffering. All because of their corruption. It's their corruption. Some like said 6 billion. And we are going to the IMF.
At the same time, I have pointed to you that the things they have brought to bear, which is supposed to reduce corruption.
No, but that's
especially
the wrong
in the
approach.
area of digitalization and digitization of the systems.
Sam,
Lands Commission features here because people go there and they must pay some bribe somewhere here and there. Lands Commission, Dr. Baumia, is the one superintending the digitization of that place. If you talk about the court, you and I know that there's a digitization process in the court.
Those alone are not sufficient to solve corruption. No, you don't know the human mind. Human beings will always beat the system. What we need is leadership by example, number one. All the cases that have been brought, he needs to deal with them. Like we've been saying, NDA on his desk, he's not dealing with it, okay? You look at the special prosecutor. He's not funding special prosecutor. Sam, if you go there, you're not careful, you weep for the special prosecutor. The place is empty. It's a ghost town. The special prosecutor's office is a ghost town. So this syndicate, he has to stop. This is syndicate. We need to break it.
I said we'll take a break here, but let me hear the government statistician briefly before we go on a break. Yeah, so Professor Enin, what should we be doing from here, from your research, which everybody else is applauding you, the Shraj, and the United Nations organization for a good job done?
Thank you very much, Samson. 3 quick things. Let me start with the first that is not directly under the domain of Ghana Statistical Service, which is the NACAP, which ends in 2014. So clearly, we need to review the findings from this survey with the tenant of the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan. And then between now and 2024, the stakeholders will see how we revise our action towards the end of NACAP. 2 things that falls within the domain of Statistical Service, which will definitely need other stakeholders to push us on, are the other issues that are said are in the report but have not been discussed at all or extensively. One of which is the pathways of bribe payment and the rippling effect that it has. The gender dimensions is there. I'm not going to talk about it. The vote buying is there. I'm not going to talk about it. What I want to emphasize is the bribe payment associated with recruitment. What this survey brought to the fore is, out of our respondents, 12.5% of them had applied for positions in public service. 25% of them got it. And out of this 25%, we had about 4 out of 10 having either pay bribe or get a job via nepotism or both. My worry here, as I said, is the rippling effect, because it's not just the implications of paying the bribe, but the consequences of getting people who are not competent. And at the end of the day, the effect from the corruption perspective would be compounded by we getting a public service that doesn't have the right people. Again, in the survey, we found out issues whether all public institutions do interviews, all of them write exams and things like that. So this conversation should be sustained from the perspectives of what are the rippling effects of bribe payment. Is it just amount and its effect on the macroeconomy, or it's affecting our entire system? The last thing which I really would hope as a country we can push forward is this exercise has been financially driven by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. The total budget for this exercise was about 6 million Ghana cedis. If you look at this from the perspective of the 5 billion that we've quantified, as a country we should institutionalize this, and then over time we can monitor the real effect of interventions that we are putting in. And Ghana Statistical Service is poised to have this at least 2 or 3 years, and then we can monitor the trends, the patterns over time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Professor Anyenini. And you know, he spoke about the gender dimensions, and that's part I was curious and I was happy about it. During elections, I continue to campaign that vote more women, and people say, well, you can't say that they are not as corrupt, but that's true. Survey upon survey confirm that women are less corrupt, and the survey shows that women in public office are less likely to demand or ask, solicit anything from you when you go to them. When I was voting in the Osu area, I voted Senator Rollins, then I voted Indum, then now I vote in Dansuman, I voted Indum's candidate, and then I voted Esla. I voted Bridget, and I voted Esla. Let's also play our part and see how we can help. Corruption, like Justice Kolendi said in very the best of words, corruption compromises democracy and deeply, gravely hurts the poor. We must never give up if we want roads, hospitals, schools that don't get washed or blown away less than a year after they have been constructed at obviously overpriced rates. If they come to us and you take the bribes, the politicians are giving you money and you take to vote, that's what you are encouraging. $991.2 billion US is the total of illicit financial outflows from developing countries in 2012. It's worse today, according to the Global Financial Integrity 2014. This is over 10 times the official development assistance received by these developing countries. Over 10 times. Some $6.6 trillion left these countries illicitly between 2003 and 2012. This illicit flow increased by 9.4% each year in that period, faster than growth of those economies. 2.7% of global GDP is available for laundering. That's according to the United Nations Organization Drugs and Crime. We'll be right back.
Angry artisans and spare parts dealers pelted the Member of Parliament for Swami and Majority Leader Oseche Mensah Bonsu and his visiting entourage over deteriorating Swami roundabout at Francho Road. Officials of Joshop Construction say at least 1.5 kilometer asphalt overlay after addressing acute shortage of bitumen. But despite the assurances, artisans and spare parts dealers say their lives and businesses have been impacted negatively by dust from the construction. Apart from dwindling sales, They allege some have suffered respiratory tract infections after inhaling dust.
We are suffering a lot. How the dust is over us, we are suffering. Even when we come to market, our tents, dust come on it. Even someone come to purchase and see, he don't want to buy. They are all covered in dust. So when someone comes, he thinks it's old, but it's brand new batteries.
And how is this impacting on your business?
The market is not going as we are expected it will be.
Me electric weather, yani truck block machine ni ayi wahan musino. Say ya di nso ma wa hwese futuro na changing in color no. Open to year na futuro na se no. So say aduane kwa ko to be so na nso ni ho no ma. Enu nso ran ma na aduane nso na fita untimi ni.
He is into manufacturing of trucks and then a block machine. And he says he's been manufacturing them, producing them in their numbers. But because of the dusty nature of the road, people come and they assume that the machines are not brand new, buying them.
Tama na umechucha so no. Na ye niema na yetimi buye so. Sese niema na yakata kata so a yebra yentimi buye so. Ese obuye so na mfuturo na wuram. Mfuturo no wuram so aya na akwakoye tantantan wobra ya penti no. Na akwakoye tantantan nti ma yentimi emuye so.
Because of the dusty nature of the road, they are being forced to cover the things that they have produced here. Talking about the block machines, what happens is that after production they have to paint them for it to look new, but because of the dust they are being forced to cover them in a way to prevent the dust from reaching them.
Many of us here have been coughing. You see elements of dust when you sneeze. We find dust even in our phlegm.
The artisans and the spare parts dealers and the traders here are uncomfortable with the situation because of the dusty nature of the road here. They are producing, but unfortunately there's low sales for these items they are producing here.
You're welcome back, and thanks very much to our guest that we have been speaking to earlier. Martin Pebu is a lawyer and rights activist. Mary Awalana Ada, Programs Manager, Ghana Integrity Initiative. Professor Kwesi Enin, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Dr. John Osai Kwapong with the CDD, he's a political scientist. Now joining us is Kennedy Osei Nyako, MP, Achim Swedru, and Chairman, Roads and Transport Committee of Parliament. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Osei Nyako. And surprising, there are people, some of your constituents in Ashanti region who are saying that why did the MPs have to wait for their constituents to bare their teeth before they start telling them stories, and now the entire caucus of Ashanti is seeking audience with the president for projects in Ashanti region to be attended to?
Samson, thank you for having me on your show, and a very good morning to you and your panelists there. Well, before I will just begin with my submission, I want to just correct some kind of impression that government has just waited that long before attending to road project in the Ashanti region. That is not so. But, well, Samson, I have to take you aback a little. Let me take you aback a little bit. Road issues in this country is they are major concern for every Ghanaian. And if you want to just talk about it, you can look at the recent Rana report by CDD Afro Barometer when they asked about issues that borders on Ghanaians, and majority of them talks about roads. So it means roads are a big problem, a concern for every Ghanaian. And this concern, I'm not sure it should be limited to one political party, either Kufuor or the NDC. It's a major concern which, as a country, all of us need to address it. And I'm saying so because, Samson, if you have a country that has a road network, a total network of about 78,000 401. I mean, it has been reviewed, but yet to be published. It has even moved from 78,000 to about 93,000 kilometers of roads, because there's a lot of expansion and urban centers are opening up and more roads are being added on. And if you have just a little over 34% being paved road, it means majority of your roads are in bad condition, bad shape. And how do we address this matter? Since we have limited budget as a country, that's why I'm saying that we need to have a national dialogue as to how we are going to approach our road infrastructure in this country, so that we will shift policy-wise in terms of our infrastructure policy to say that, okay, for the next 5 years or for the next 10 years, we are going to dedicate maybe about 60% of our revenue that we generate in this country, focus on our roads, to build good roads for the next 10 years. It's a decision that we have to take. But if such decisions are not taken, and we are doing the piecemeal approach, then definitely this is how people will get frustrated, because everybody needs good roads. And first of all, I must say that I share the plight of the Swami magazine. People shouldn't have taken that long, because the contractor on the road also was facing a little bit challenge. So he has to, because we don't produce bitumen in this country. All bitumens are imported into this country. So anytime any contractor working on such major projects run out of bitumen, he has to wait for a while. And the closest place country that we can get it is from Cote d'Ivoire. So I share their plight and their concern. It's a genuine concern that they have raised. Government is not having a deaf ears over issues of roads across country, especially in the Ashanti region. And if you look at records or data that we have, there are several road projects that have gone on in the Ashanti, especially in the Greater Kumasi. Within the first 4 years of President Akufo-Addo and the MPP government, government took about 55 million euros, which is equivalent of $60.6 million, to construct some major roads in the Greater Kumasi, Oforikrom, Bantema, Kwadaso, New Tafo. I mean, a lot of KMA area. But it is not sufficient. It's about 100 kilometers of road that contractor construction of UK, the one that is currently building the Kumasi Airport and the Central Market Phase 2. They are the ones that did it. They did the project. They completed this year. And last year too, another 100 kilometers of road within the Greater Accra inner city roads have been started by Sino Hydro, which is going to take Sino Hydro 36 months to complete it. I know Ashanti region, especially within the Greater Kumasi, which has almost about 1,006 kilometers of roads, but only about a little over 40% is paved. It means they have a much problem when it comes to good roads. So if they have a little over 40% as a good, then we are talking about 50+%, which is unpaid. So government.
So I'm listening to what you are saying, and I can't reconcile that with why constituents in the Ashanti region have been organizing press conferences and complaining about bad roads over a period now until Osei Mensah Bonsu was put in this embarrassing and threatening situation. Well, some people say, well, you brought it upon yourself. MPs, you are not supposed to be doing these things, but you go and promise the people that is your job. So that's how come they do that. So how do you explain why these the MPs have decided to come together to go to the Jubilee House and put some pressure, bring some pressure to bear on the president to ensure that there is attention to construction in the Ashanti region? If what you are saying has been delivered, is what it is.
Well, Samson, I spoke about the Greater Kumasi. You know where the Greater Kumasi metropolis is limited to. There are adjoining towns or constituencies within the Ashanti region that also has major road challenges. And Samson, like I said, if government is faced with limited resources, government cannot construct or do all roads simultaneously. So critical roads are being picked and are worked on. Akufo-Addo government, all of us as a country, have to admit that no government in the history of this country have done more road extensively in this country than the Akufo-Addo government. But it is not enough, and that is it. It is not enough because our road challenges in this country are enormous, are more. Because if you have in excess of 60 plus kilometers, 60+% of your roads that are bad countrywide, it tells you the frustrations the Ghanaian people go through each and every day, especially those that apply on those roads. So, yes, I admit that within the Ashanti region, within several constituencies, there are problems, road problems. But because government cannot have the resources to do everything, some key roads have been selected, some critical roads. And I can tell you, every constituency, all the 275 constituencies across the country, either one or two critical roads have been picked and are being worked on.
Okay.
That doesn't mean there are no other roads. There are much roads in some of these same constituencies that need attention. And all borders on funding. And you know something, you know how even government as a country, we struggle. The entire country, we struggle in terms of even revenue, meeting our revenue target. If you have a country where even government misses its revenue target, not less than about 13% annually. So if you do projections, you do your budget, you say, I'm going to give the road sector about 4 billion Ghana cedi. And
so the question is, why are the MPs going to the presidency to put unnecessary pressure on the president?
So there are some roads I understand they are talking about some stored roads. It's not like the road has not been started. The road work started, going on, but because of funding, the contractors left site. So maybe they are going to meet the president, discuss with the president to find out if there are some kind of better arrangement government can do to get funds for these contractors to move back, because all these people that are completed, and it is not even in Ashanti region alone. Across the country, when you move around, there are several road projects that have started under the President Akufo-Addo and the MPP government that are stalled because of funding challenges, because government is not able to have the funding to complete this project. That is why recently government is looking at options of even going for road bond to see about 5 billion road bond, which is government is currently discussing with some local banks to see if in September they can go to the market to see if they can raise about 5 billion for the road sector, so that government can settle the indebtedness with this road contractor, which is very key. Because if I tell you, Samson, if government should be able to find money for all contractors working currently across the country to move back to site without even awarding new contract, I can tell you most of our road problems will be fixed in this country. And we will see a drop down of this rampant demonstration by constituents. That's
well, interestingly, we are seeing sword cutting for construction projects happening just this week. And so you don't even know how to explain all of this. But I needed you, we understand that you have a meeting to go into and you have sacrificed to speak to us just briefly. So finally, I want to know, these roads that are being done right now, what is their lifespan? Must the roads also, take the cycle of 4 years, that almost every 4 years, roads are being constructed, reconstructed again? Okay, so we lost Kennedy Osei-Nyako, who is MP, Achim Swedru, and Chairman, Roads and Transport Committee of Parliament. Let's go to Professor Kwesi Enin, who is with us via Zoom. Prof, so this development, some have suggested that the MPs should brace themselves for more of these, where their constituents will will literally attack them for unfulfilled promises.
So, Samson, if I take this MP's submission right now, it is that kind of political behavior that creates mistrust, that creates lack of credibility in the political process, and that gives constituents and the citizenry of this country that there is a huge chasm between what the political class tells citizens to gain power and what they can deliver. When this gentleman fudges history and talks about one government being the government that has constructed roads, go to the central region, go to the western region. Okay? And I think it is important for our political discourse and for our national stability that these journals, rhapsodies around politics, around security, around violence, around political discourse must be predicated at least on a certain respect for the citizenry. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Samson, I've said this several times. No one wants a wide social conflagration in this country. But I think we are beginning to reach a point where this sense of exclusion, that we don't matter. All that people want from us is our vote. They will tell us stories that are not true so that we vote for them. And then when they get into power, they will tell us, oh, but we didn't know that things were so bad. So what was the basis for giving that promise? So politics has been hollowed out to such an extent that those who govern have lost the respect and the trust of those who are governed. And I think this gentleman, Osei Nyaku's behavior is emblematic of that. Two, when the language of violence has a direct correlation to politicians listening, first coming to power, and then when the threat or the actual use of violence leads to politicians acting or government acting, then the citizenry understands and perceives violence as a legitimate tool for getting political results and developmental results. And that is very unfortunate. He couldn't answer your question as to why they were going, MPs were going to see the president. Okay, so there's a crisis of political credibility in this country right now. And we are going to see, and because the politicians themselves have glorified violence and they respond to threats of an actual act of violence, unfortunately, the signal is that if you do that, you will get quick responses to your problems. That is most unfortunate, and that is very dangerous. But this is not the last time that we are going to see this.
The politicians are supposed to go to parliament, as in the MPs, they're supposed to go to parliament and make laws. They are legislators. That's who they are.
Yeah.
But we live in a system where they go and promise that they will fix a road, they will build a hospital, they will build a school, and they don't have what it takes to do them. Unless when perhaps their party wins power, then they ride on the fact that their party is in power. When some development takes place, then they take the glory for it, or they say they negotiated for the thing to be done in those areas. Shouldn't something be done? Because the people in this area ought to be asking the MCE, the district assembly, about their roads. They shouldn't be asking Osei Mensah Bonsu. But this is where he found himself.
Well, it's because of the nature of how we use political rhetoric and mimicry, to get people to vote for us. I'm using mimicry because political mimicry creates a false impression to people that we can deliver and do or fulfill your expectation, knowing specifically their incapacity to deliver that particular service. And therefore, what we are seeing from citizenry is that you have not been honest to us. That when you came pleading for our vote and we gave to you, you knew you would not be able to deliver. But you were more interested in your personal political ends than the community ends and by extension, the state ends. And I think we need to reverse this type of behavior. We need to say no, that credibility in politics does matter. And getting people to support, to pull together, and to deliver the security and the development that we want must be predicated on trust, on transparency, and a discourse that is dialogic and that is founded on the facts. Telling and twisting the reality for political gain and political power will threaten and eventually undermine the edifice that we have built since 1992. When we ask God to bless our homeland and make our nation great and strong, it is predicated on the fact that we must be truthful in engaging the citizen. When we recite the national pledge, all those are predicated on openness and engaging the citizenry in a manner that builds trust and loyalty to the state.
Professor Anyenini, in a minute before we let go of you, there are those who suggest that for the MPs from the Ashanti region to come together to go to the presidency and to put pressure that you have to do X, Y, Z, it may be a bad thing to do. Otherwise, what does that say of the MPs for the other regions as well? Are they also supposed to go there and ask that something be done? And is it to suggest that the development should be done discriminatorily? What do you say to that? Just in a minute.
Well, I think it's a very dangerous trend because what it means is that the Minister of Roads does not matter, the Minister of Finance doesn't matter, the committee on which Osei acquisition does not matter, and that it is the personal intervention of the president away from all the processes, mechanisms of decision-making that matters. That we have an emperor who governs us, and that it is only through his intervention that development happens. Mr. President, please don't see these members of parliament, because otherwise delegations from all the other regions will come. That will undermine our governance, it will undermine parliament, it will undermine the processes that we have been building since 1992.
Thank you so very much, Professor Kwesi Anyenini. I'm coming back to my two guests in the studio, but let me share some of your messages that you've sent with us. This one, Mike J says, thank you, Martin Pebu, for calling a spade what it is. Corruption is glorified at the highest level, and the seat of government has become the brewery for corruption. Little Tete says, without strong watchdog institutions, impunity becomes the very foundation upon which systems of corruption are built. And if impunity is not demolished, all efforts to bring an end to corruption will be in vain. Prince Cable says, I have said and will always say, corruption is Ghana's barrier to economic prosperity. Break it and we are there. Thanks to Martin Pebu for his boldness. Ni Kote says, Martin Pebu said the president must resign. I am glad to hear this on a national platform. This must be part of the national discourse. Baba Chairman says, I share the pain and agony of Martin Pebu on the subject of corruption and its related effects being discussed, but I am of the view that he has been excessively harsh on the president this morning. An anti-corruption campaigner says that a lot of non-prosecution retrieval of monies are also good. We should look at that rather than look to only prosecution all the time. And he says that a strong denouncement by the president and his appointees, not just in words, but in deeds. That strong commitment can have a ripple effect. The president should be speaking as frequently as he was doing during the campaigns and telling his people that if you want to make wealth, it should not be under my government. And he says, if the people, if they don't see anything wrong with corruption and will even hail thieves or corrupts simply because they were not caught or won a legal battle, then we are doomed. So praising the corruption is also another situation that some are very, very worried about. Yakubu Ibn Chambers, this is a long one, but let me try. He says, we've got to shift the needle on bribery and corruption and find everlasting cure. Future-proofing the country called Ghana against bribery and corruption requires a coordinated, comprehensive methodology and collaborative efforts of all. An end-to-end visibility of the law on all persons and intelligence gathering on all institutions is necessary to curb this canker. The solution lies in the advancement of technology at speed, the modernization and activation of surveillance management functions in all government agencies and state institutions. In a nutshell, corruption should be made a criminal offense by our laws. It is. Okay, but you say it should be punishable by death. 5 billion is way too much to lose as a state. Yakubu Ibn Chambers sent in that one. I'll read this one finally from PK in Elembele. He says, in fact, the high level of corruption in Ghana is as a result of family and friends government. No one will ever punish his brother for wrongdoing, and that is the problem. Okay, now to you, Martin. Osei Chairman's situation and what the decision of the Ashanti caucus in Parliament have decided to do. What do you say about that?
Yes, Sam. Oh, I said that, when we're discussing corruption,
the people have apologized for pelting sachet water at him. But they say they will not apologize for their conduct except pelting sachet water at him.
Yeah, so I was saying that I have a little request. We didn't quite finish with the solutions to corruption. Okay. I thought there was going to be a full segment. So can I use that time to address a few of them, at least just 1 minute, then I'll come to a segment.
Okay, quickly.
So if you look at the report that Shiraj and the Ghana Statistical Service brought up, especially when it comes to the police, their fines, okay? So the report shows the percentage of about 13% who paid bribes in order to avoid a fine. I'm interested in that one. So page 46, 13.8% paid bribe to avoid a fine. Okay? Yes, so this particular one, we've discussed it in the past. They said we're going to do spot fines. So if somebody crosses the red light, in this day and age, why do you have to haul him all the way to court? There should be a spot fine. And of course, it should be done electronically so that the monies don't go into people's pockets. That's very, very important. Then number 2, on the matter of this in our public servants, I mean the politicians and all this, the asset declaration, we need an amendment, okay, so that the Constitution, as with you and I, this is something both of us share dearly, 286 Clause 4, so that automatically all these people, the politicians and those very senior public officers will go before Shraj automatically. Because Sam, from what you said, from Barometer 2019, and even before 2019, we've known that we've always had a problem with an adversarial system. People are scared of reporting. So why don't you put the law in such a way that it's anonymous, so it's automatic? If only you are coming to office, you declare, and if you are leaving, automatically you go. Let's just put it once and for all, so that you don't need people reporting. Okay, very, very key constitutional amendment.
The sole commissioner for judgment debt, inordinate judgment debt, Justice Apau,
yes,
came to a conclusion that non-funding, state funding of political parties is one big issue.
Excellent.
Because as the CDD has found out, you need at least $100 million
and I think it's low
to prosecute a successful presidential campaign.
And I think it's low.
They won't get that money from anywhere.
Yeah.
They'll steal it from you.
Yes.
So is that also not one way to, curb it?
Okay, yes, perfect. So in that case, that's why I support Chairman Sabonsu. Maybe we should try the Westminster model. Stop electing which will require a constitutional amendment. We shouldn't vote for the president nationally. We should do the party system. So the party that has the majority, then they will elect the prime minister. Okay. In that case, he's not beholden to the contractors. He's not. Because look, when you meet those big contractors, it's a different mindset. Today it's money. They don't care about, milk of this is sympathy.
Okay. So if you can exhaust maybe one more point.
Okay. Yes. So and then on the matter of this recovery. So I think I mentioned it basically that look, let's engineer the laws more towards recovery of the stolen wealth. Nobody wants longer prison terms. So like the way they amended the Criminal Offences Act. So now in Act 1034, they say minimum term for corruption 12 years and then maximum 25. No, let's be more interested in recovery. So the OSP is what we should use more. Okay, and then of course the almighty constitutional amendment to separate the office of the Attorney General from the Minister of Justice. So these are, I think this will help in the fight against corruption. Okay. So Chairman Sabonsu's matter, I think having said this, I would just say that it shows that citizens are more engaging. Yes, I don't support the violence. No, not at all. I don't support it. But sometimes it's inevitable. You see, because it means that they have been pent up. When you see people do that, it means that they have been pent up. They feel they've been deceived. This 419 thing we've been talking about. You come, you talk to get the vote. Then the next time, oh no, I don't control the exchequer. I don't control the public purse. You see, so it shows citizens' engagement. We need citizens to show more anger. Like I've said, because the president is showing that he has a tough skin. So the only thing he will understand is when you show more anger, like what the teachers did. When the TUC came and they did the various strikes, you see, they quickly called them and gave them 15% COLA. So dear citizens, let's badge together. Let's come together. Let's get more demonstrations. We form the citizen coalitions. We will be going around the country. More citizens should join so that we'll do more demos. Then we can transform this country.
All right. Yes, yeah, Mary.
Yes. As I've listened, something comes to mind. George Orwell's book, The Animal Farm. I believe Ghana is gradually shifting towards an Orwellian society of sorts, where some are more equal than others. I agree with Prof. Enin that the president should not tolerate meeting with some segregated groupings. Our constitution tells us that development should be equally spread. If not, perhaps maybe we should be thinking about equity as the best alternative, but equality of the development. As Ghanaians, every community, every region deserves development. And so when we prioritize our development in our national development plans, and then we culminate this in our budgets, we should be seen to be implementing what we have all agreed, what we have appropriated and been signed on to. So when we begin to see that the president, we have some people who are more equal than others going to the presidency to demand more roads, then it means we from the Upper East as well would go. Prof. Enin says go to the Western region, these areas. I have traveled the length and breadth of this country through the work I do, and I know that most of the regions which produce food and also are the source of much of the revenue we get from our mining or mineral resources do not have the best of roads and all the infrastructure we are talking about. And so we shouldn't see others to be more equal than others. We are all Ghanaians first and foremost. And when we promote such, then we are beginning to promote a culture where accountability is not what we are promoting. And we shouldn't be surprised to then be seeing people from other communities begin to also demand vociferously from our leaders the share or their share of the national cake. It is unfortunate. We need to reject some of these behaviors. We need to begin to... we've seen what has happened in the Philippines recently. We do not want that to happen in Ghana. We want to all be safe to enjoy the benefits of the national cake. But for that to happen, the president and those we have put there to ensure it happens should do so.
Okay. Let me go to Kennedy Osei-Nyako. I understand that he's joined us back. Newsfile is brought to you by Bank of Africa, MTN, Ashesi University, Robert & Sons Optical Services, Waylead Properties, Finance Ghana, and Juraplast. And remember that the EcoBank Joy Habitat fair has been going on, the cities and habitats, under the theme Home Ownership, where you live matters. It started yesterday and will continue to the Sunday, the 24th, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day, and it's happening at the Achimota Retail Center. Go there and get the best advice for getting a home and also making your decisions as far as your home is concerned. Yes, sir. I had asked the question whether you think that we shouldn't have a way out in our road construction where the roads are constructed and so frequently they are breaking up and we have to fix them all over again, and therefore as if we are sinking a lot of money into a bottomless pit?
Well, Samson, first of all, let me say a few words. I think Mr. Koscielny said something which I think maybe I'll pardon him because maybe he did not listen to me, because I made it clear why the Ashanti MPs want to go and see the president, and they are on two issues. One is about roads currently going on which have been stalled, and some IPEP projects across the Ashanti region to the same that have been stalled that they are going to see. So these are two major issues that they are going to do. But let me come back to your issue. And you are right when you said you have, as a country, we need to find a way how we can deal with having a good road, building good roads and maintaining them. But something problem is that if you don't have the funds, if you don't have a dedicated funding, say you want to construct road to a certain level, when the roads they are in phases. So if you do a first ceiling, the contractor does the first ceiling, he's supposed to be paid, and he doesn't get the money 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. This first ceiling that he's doing cannot last for more than a year, because that is the surface, the first ceiling that he has to do about 3 ceilings. So you millions of Ghana cedis to do the first ceiling. Once the contractor is waiting for the certificate to be honored for the first ceiling, and it takes him 2 to 3 years, he leaves the site, he moves away from site, and the place deteriorates. And when government gets money and the contractor has to go back, they have to do a lot of variation, and this costs the nation so much. That is why I'm saying that we need a national conversation, a dialogue. And I don't want the problem. Nobody should see this road problem as an MPP or Kufuor problem or NDC problem. It's a national problem, and we have to tackle it head on.
I suppose that is why Dr. Barometer had been talking about, is it stop the bitumen roads for concrete roads?
Well, yes, but something we cannot build concrete roads in the country. So certain part will require that you build concrete road. Other parts you have to do either bitumen surfacing, you have to do, let's say, regraveling, maybe you have to do asphalting. So there are several, project type that you can do to keep road in good shape. But the bottom line is, if you don't have the money, if you don't have the funding, how do you ensure People are calling for road to be done. We have a lot of bad road in this country. Citizens are calling, government, do our road, do our road. Government budget in a year cannot even build more than 2,000 or 3,000 kilometers in a year. How do you resolve this matter?
All right.
That is why saying that if we are not ready to find a way to increase our internal revenue, mobilize more revenue, so government can spend more on roads, then let us come and change in terms of our policy direction and infrastructure and say that, well, within the next 5 to 10 years,
yes. Thank you very much. I think just the point you are making again, you have made it for us. Thank you so very much. That is Kennedy Osei-Nyako and my other guests who have been with us discussing the matters we brought to you are Professor Samuel Kobina Enim, who is Government Statistician, Professor Kwesi Enin, Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center, Dr. John Osai Kwapong, Political Scientist, Democracy and Development Fellow, CDD Ghana, Mary Awalana Ada, Program Manager, Ghana Integrity Initiative, and Martin Pebu is a lawyer and rights activist. I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini, and my outfit, as always, is by Habil's Couture. You can call them 0200 84 19 88. Have a good afternoon, and thanks for your company.